Today's talk is about being a good lay Buddhist. Reflections on the Mahanama Sutta. Well, just a recap, going through the sutta again. This sutta was given in Kapilavatthu, or rather a town near Kapilavatthu, the hometown of Prince Siddhartha, who later became the Buddha. So this is involving the Sakyans. And it was a person called Mahanama who came forward to the Buddha and actually inquired after the Buddha regarding a certain aspect. And of course, these questions. Now, as you know, the Buddha frequently receives questions from his lay disciples, monastics, and even non-Buddhists all over wherever he went. So this particular Mahanama, in fact, in a way, it is relative, because many of the Sakyans had renounced the world and became monks. He took over the so-called being a Raja, a chieftain in this particular community to manage the Sakyan community. So the question he raised was, how is a lay follower defined? Now this is interesting. And the Buddha answered, when you have gone for refuge to the Buddha, the teaching, and the Sangha, then you are considered a lay follower. Now, refuge basically means coming under a shade. That means when you are having hot day or hot sun, you want to move away from suffering, from what you call unpleasantness, you go to a shade. Or if it's raining, you want to move from place to place, you might use an umbrella. So that umbrella or a shade is a refuge. It may be temporary, it may be permanent. So refuge is something that you move away from something uncomfortable, and hopefully with that refuge you can move on and fare better. So this is how the Buddha defined a lay follower. Now moving on, the second question, how is an ethical lay follower defined? So being a lay follower is one, but ethical is another issue. And the Buddha answered, a person who doesn't kill living beings, who steals, commits sexual misconduct, a person who lies or use alcoholic drinks that cause negligence and heedlessness and so on. So this is considered a ethical lay follower. And most of us Buddhists will recognize that being an ethical lay follower means observing the 5 precepts. And the sutta continues, how do we define a lay follower who is practicing to benefit both themselves and others? Now, before this, there was an iteration where the Buddha talks about a lay follower who is practicing to benefit themselves only and not benefit others. I skip over that and I move on to this particular last portion. So the Buddha clearly says that the lay follower should be accomplished in faith. Accomplished means very thorough, very well practiced in faith or confidence, and encourages others to do the same. They are accomplished in ethical conduct. So, of course, at least the 5 precepts. Encourages others to do the same. They are accomplished in generosity and encourages others to do the same. So, over the past few weeks, we had various speakers in Nalanda covering these aspects of faith and confidence, ethical conduct, and generosity. So today we'll talk about they like to see the mendicants and encourage others to do the same. And they like to hear the true teaching and encourage others to do the same. And then, of course, after my talk this Sunday or today, the next speaker will talk about how we define a lay follower who is practicing to benefit both themselves and others. And the Buddha says, they readily memorize the teachings they've heard. You must understand, in those days, there were no books, no digital recorders or video cameras. So the only way to actually keep a teaching within one's mind or ever present is literally to memorize what they heard a teacher say. So memorization was the way of keeping the teachings or the books in their head, because there was no other means of doing at that time. So of course, today we have more resources. We can refer to the internet, we can go libraries and so on. And the next one is, after they put the book into the head, the teachings into the head, they doesn't mean that they accept the teachings, but they examine the meaning of the teachings they have memorized. And understanding the meaning, the teaching, they practice accordingly, and they encourage others to do the same. And that's how we define a lay follower who is practicing to benefit both themselves and others. So this will be covered by the next speaker. Now, going to the subject matter for today. How do we define a lay follower who is practicing to benefit both themselves and others? Now, lay follower, the Pali term is called upasaka. And here, the bottom portion, the fourfold assembly. Sometimes you will hear various people refer to the fourfold sangha. That is technically wrong because the term sangha is reserved for monks and nuns. So whenever sangha is used, it is definitely the monastic, those who are renounced, bhikkhu and bhikkhunis. Sangha never refers to lay people. This upasaka being lay male devotees and upasika, lay female devotees, together with the sangha members, form what they call chatu parisa. Chatu meaning four, and parisa meaning assembly. Now, moving on, let's break down the aspects. We touched on lay follower. Now we're talking about practicing. Who is practicing? What do you mean by that? Now, since the theme of this series, a lot of emphasis has been placed on the Dhammapada, so I thought it appropriate, instead of 100% referring to suttas, to put more emphasis on the Dhammapada verses that offer certain teachings. So what do you mean by a practicing person? So the wise ones, in Dhammapada verse 23, the wise ones ever meditative and steadfastly persevering, alone experience Nibbana, the incomparable freedom from bondage. Now, practicing means the wise person. Why do you say a wise person practices? Why? Because the person who chooses appropriately, who considers what advice given to him, then after understanding what's going on, and for their own benefit, at least in the beginning, before they share with others, they choose appropriately. And those people who choose and consider all this are considered the wise ones. And what do they practice? They are ever meditative and steadfastly, it means consistently, and not based on your moods and on the stars, and when they feel like it. But steadfastly means consistently, daily, every moment, and so on. Persevering, putting in effort to practice. Now, ever meditative. What is meditation? Now, ever meditative does not mean that it is only a sitting posture where you sit down, okay, early in the morning I shall meditate, or before I go to sleep I will meditate. Those are formal meditative sessions. But meditative means being aware of your mind, being aware of what's going on around you, and so on. So with that, you can do it the whole day, as long as you are awake. Not only in the sitting, in a formal session, like in Nalanda, just before this session started, or early morning before you even left the house to come to Nalanda for this talk. But as long as you wake up, you are aware of what's going on. You're aware of your breathing in, breathing out. You're aware of your getting out of the bed, the posture you're in, sitting on the bed, standing up, walking to the bathroom, getting yourself tidied up, maybe have a bath and so on, and having breakfast and all those kind of things. It means meditative being aware of all activities in your mind, not leading a life like an automatic robot. Most of us are actually leading lives as an automatic robot, and we just go through what we call routines, but we do not know whether it's right or wrong. And because of these routines, we are doing things unthinkingly, and we can cause problems, and we are not aware of certain things that will crop up that can be improved, and so on. So meditative is very important. So this term meditative in this particular Dhammapada verse is very wide-ranging, not just the formal session of meditative sitting and so on. And then alone experience Nibbana. Why? Because when they practice something, they develop a skill. That skill is for themselves. So when you're hungry, you eat. Another person doesn't get full because you eat, of course, you get full. So when you do some things, you do it for yourself. obviously. So when you practice and you make progresses, therefore you will experience the culmination of this practice. And of course, Nibbana is described as incomparable freedom from bondage. Bondage, what is this bondage? Bondage because we are tied to this samsara, a cycle of birth and death. We cannot escape from it. And when you attain Nibbana, there is freedom. You are freed from this bondage of repeated being born and die, born and die. And this freedom is described as incomparable because there's no other freedom. Even going to heaven is not freedom from bondage. Why? You are born there, and sooner or later you will pass away, and the whole cycle of birth and death repeats itself. And we are very, very old in this cycle of birth and death. We have been going round and round. We have been to the heavens, we have been to the Brahma worlds, we have been animals, we have been to the hell worlds. Now we are here as humans. And we continue in this bondage to samsara as long as you do not attempt to develop yourself to acquire this freedom from this bondage. Now, Dhammapada verse 24, ever grows the glory of him who is energetic, mindful, and pure in conduct, discerning and self-controlled, righteous and heedful. So clearly, common sense will tell you, wow, this is a long list of qualities we need to develop for ourselves. Glory of him who is energetic, means full energy, full enthusiasm, who want to practice and go out and do things. And mindful, as I mentioned earlier, mindfulness, meditation, and so on. Pure in conduct. Conduct means something physical we do where other people can see for ourselves or for other people. This is usually regarding morality and virtuous conduct. Discerning. Discerning is somebody who asks questions, who sees through, try to seek out what is the meaning of this teaching so that we can put into practice. He doesn't accept blindly what I say or another teacher says. Even the Buddha says, do not believe the Buddha. Please be discerning. Please analyze what he says, and so on. And having understood it and realized that it is wise to follow that with discernment, then you begin to control yourself. So the term self-control is important. The whole purpose of the path is to gain back self-control as opposed to leading a life like a robot. Okay, we want to be in control. So to control means there must be a controller. The controller is ever mindful. When you do things automatically, you are no more in control. You are just using your habits and so on. And of course, righteous means you're doing things which are appropriate, which support you and support those around you. You do not hurt others, you do not hurt yourself, and there are a whole long list. Of course, heedful is yet another aspect in a way related to mindfulness. Heedful is to pay attention, okay, and in a way is a synonym for mindfulness. Dhammapada verse 25. By effort and heedfulness, discipline and self-mastery, let the wise one make for himself an island which no flood can overwhelm. Again, this verse says by effort, so the emphasis on effort. Heedfulness, discipline, okay, self-mastery or being self-controlled. And self-mastery, let the wise one, okay, the wise one who wants to go out and practice, make for himself an island. Why? When he develops these skills within himself, he protects himself. Of course, when he shares this know-how with other people, the other people develop those skills also, they can protect themselves. Only we can protect ourselves in this samsara, because it is only we who are born, we live a life, we pass away. So it is we, it's not others. So we have developed the skills to be able to survive in samsara. And therefore, when you develop these skills, you make for yourself an island where no flood can overwhelm. No flood means the flood of defilements, the flood of irrationality that overwhelms us and let us continue in this cycle of birth and death, which we have been doing for so long. We are experts in letting the flood in, overwhelming us, and we continue. And we have been going round and round in the cycle of birth and death. So this Dhammapada verse, this is only the first tranche of sayings, which if you analyze and reflect deeply, with respect to other aspects of the Buddha's teaching, you can see a lot of implications. Of course, only summarized in this one simple sentence, one Dhammapada verse, and so on. Now, moving on, the aspect of to benefit both themselves and others. Now, here, Dhammapada verse 195 to 196, that means two Dhammapada verses combined together. It says, "He who reveres those worthy of reverence, the Buddhas and their disciples, who have transcended all obstacles and passed beyond the reach of sorrow and lamentation. He who reveres such peaceful and fearless ones, his merit none can compute by any measure." Now, the first thing I want to answer the question, how do you benefit yourselves? Well, the bottom portion underlined, his merit none can compute by any measure, because he has paid respect. Reveres means he holds in high esteem, and those people who are worthy of reverence. In this case, the Buddha and their enlightened disciples. Not just the monks and nuns, but the enlightened disciples. That can cover monks, nuns, and even lay people. So, and the earlier sentence says, who have transcended all obstacles and passed beyond the reach of sorrow and lamentation. So clearly, this sentence clearly shows that the Buddha and his enlightened disciples have practiced what needs to be practiced. They have transcended all obstacles and passed beyond the reach of sorrow and lamentation. That is, they have no more sorrow and lamentation. These are all mental suffering. When a person becomes a Buddha or an Arahat, what happens is that they still have a body. If you use a knife and cut them, or they go around a forest area, some thorns will poke into them, they still feel physical pain, but they are not troubled by it. Some of us, sometimes we see, oh, yo, is there a poisonous plant that poked into me? I must go and seek medical attention. So we get hysterical. So our minds come in and get suffering and get a lot of anxiety. But for these individuals, these Arahats, what happens is that there's no more sorrow and lamentation. There's no more worry. So mental-wise, they are ever peaceful. They are physically, if they get poked or whatever by a sharp object, blood comes out, they can still feel the pain. But they are not overly concerned about that. Now, he who reveres such a peaceful and fearless one, this is another quality. All enlightened disciples of the Buddha, of course, including the Buddha, these are known as the fearless ones. Now, all of us, we have mental suffering. So whenever there's a heavy thunderstorm, there's a clap of thunder, especially those thunder which very near us, lightning strike nearby, and we hear a very loud thunder. Most of us normal people will jump up. It is only the Buddhas and the Arahats who will not jump up. Why? There's no concern about all this, because we are frightened by this what they call loud noise and something that happened. It may not be a thunderclap, it may be something that fell down that makes a very loud noise. So the first immediate instinct is that self-preservation. There is fear that arises. Fear of what? Fear of danger. To whom? To you, and maybe even our loved ones. So there's fear. But for all these arahats, enlightened individuals, there's fearlessness. And if you want to know how do we test out whether a certain person claims to be an arahat, you test the person's fearlessness. Okay, and certain things will happen and over the centuries, there have been commentaries and stories, even in Sri Lanka, where one monk might test another monk. One monk claims, oh, I am enlightened. Another monk will say, are you sure? And then between the two of them, they do certain things to test the fearlessness of the one who claims to be enlightened, and so on. Okay, if they show fear, clearly they are not enlightened. He who has gone for refuge in the Buddha, the teaching, and his order, penetrates with transcendental wisdom the Four Noble Truths, suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the Noble Eightfold Path leading to the cessation of suffering. Now, the benefit to themselves. Well, the benefit is when you go for refuge, you learn things. So when you learn things from the Buddha and all his disciples, what do they teach? They teach the Dhamma, the teaching. And when you try to understand, reflect upon it, and meditate upon it, and to practice it, you penetrate Penetrate means you go deep into understanding and realization. This wisdom contained within the Four Noble Truths. And in Dhammapada verse, the last 192, this indeed is safe refuge. This is refuge supreme. Having gone to such a refuge, one is released from all suffering. Now, safe refuge. Why? This refuge saves you from samsara, the refuge of the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, the Four Noble Truths, penetrating the Four Noble Truths. This kind of refuge, as I mentioned earlier, is something that you shade yourself, you shield yourself from danger. So in this case, the Buddha describes that the gain that we ourselves obtain, and of course we share with other people also gains. We save ourselves from samsara. We don't have to be reborn when we are enlightened and so on. And of course, refuge supreme and release from all suffering. Not only you stop yourself being born again, but release from all suffering. Because to be born again, we start the whole story all over again. We have to experience the death of our father, our mother, our relatives, our uncles, brothers, sisters, even our children, and so on. And not to mention, we ourselves have many, many upheavals in our life. So there's constant suffering, whichever existence you are born in. And the Buddha discovered there are 31 planes of existence. As you go higher, there's lesser and lesser what they call suffering, but nevertheless, there is still some degree of suffering. Now, coming back to this again, the sutta mentions, how do you define a lay follower who is practicing and to benefit both themselves and others? So we went through some Dhammapada verses elaborating on these aspects. And then the sutta continues. They like to see the mendicants and encourage others to do the same. And later we'll deal with, they like to hear the true teaching and encourage others to do the same. Now, what do you mean by they like to see the mendicants? Now, here I put additional slash marks. Mendicants in this translated by Bhikkhu Sujato refers to monks and nuns. And the Pali term is Bhikkhu Nang. Bhikkhu by itself just means monks, but Bhikkhu Nang covers the nuns. It means the monastic disciples of the Buddha. This is a very specific Bhikkhu Nang. Now, contrast this with in earlier sharings, that means the previous month, another series where Nalanda ran, I introduced the term samana, recluse, contemplative, and ascetic. Samana is also a term, but here samana specifically points to these people who have renounced the world, may not be the Buddha's disciples, but they are ascetics. They practice certain things. They may practice asceticism, they may practice other things, but they have renounced the world. So they are known as samanas. And since Prince Siddhartha, when he renounced, he became ascetic Gotama. So most of the English texts refer to him as ascetic Gotama. But in the Pali text, you will notice that in many of the suttas, many of the non-Buddhist disciples, shall we say non-Buddhist people around India, when they meet up with the Buddha, they still refer to the Buddha as Samana Gotama. Gotama is the Buddha's family name. So they treat the Buddha as ascetic Gotama, because the word Samana means ascetic. They may not be the Buddha's disciples. But of course, later in discussions and all that, they may come to regard the Buddha as their teacher, and they seek refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. So they no longer become samanas, they may ordain and they become Bhikkhu Nang, join the ranks of monks and nuns under the Buddha. Now, another term at the bottom, the Brahmana. Brahmana, often it has also another meaning. Brahmana can also mean the Brahmin caste. This is a common interpretation. But Brahmana in the Dhammapada verses, especially in the Brahmana Varga, the chapter on that, many, in fact, all the you would say, most of the definitions of Brahmana, the Buddha uses as referring to a holy person. It means a holy person is a person well practiced, developed, and have certain ways of behavior, not necessarily from the Brahmin caste. Now, it can also mean a man leading a pure life. So Brahmana reflects a person's behavior and stature. It means a well-practiced person. So a samana can be a brahmana. Why? Because samana just means a person who has renounced the world, and brahmana means a person who is well practiced, a pure life. But a bhikkhu or bhikkhunan, monks and nuns, can be brahmana also. Why? Because disciples of the Buddha, the renounced disciples of the Buddha, can behave very well. So they are also brahmana. This is reflected in many of the Dhammapada verses given in the Brahmana Vagga. Here I show you a few slides from what I call the previous series which Nalanda ran. And this one is regarding samanas, recluse, contemplative, and ascetics. So in Dhammapada verse 264, here the English mentions, not by shaven head does a man who is indisciplined and untruthful become a contemplative. How can he who is full of desire and greed be a contemplative? So this is a question raised by the Buddha. So just because a person dresses, shaves the head, and in the bottom right picture, we show the issue of bogus monk scams. Just because the person is has shaven head, dressed like a monk or a holy person, dressed like holy person, which we regard as maybe a Buddhist monk, whether from the Theravada or the Mahayana lineage, they behave like ones, and most of us regard them as monastics, Buddhist monks. But the Buddha clearly says, not by shaven head does a person who is indisciplined and untruthful become a contemplative. Now, this thing is the aspect where regarded by the Buddha is very important. Not by physical that you regard the person as a renunciant, but the person is indisciplined. It means you have to hang around the person to see whether how the person behaves. Untruthful, that means you need to speak to the person. So to be able to evaluate whether a person is a good contemplative, a good renunciant, you have to hang around and observe the person. So, but of course, most lay people, we see a monk or a nun, or at least a person who looks like a monk and a nun from far, we regard the person as a monk and a nun. But whether the person is worthy of our respect, that's a different matter. So here, in this Dhammapada verse, the important aspect is the Buddha says, now, is the person disciplined or indisciplined? Is the person truthful or untruthful? That requires evaluation. So a good contemplative has to be evaluated, not just based on what the person wears and whether the person has shaven the head or not. Okay, this is a clear indication. So it's not as simple as just one look, or you assume the person is a good person, a good monk, or a good nun. Now over here, in Dhammapada verse 265, he who wholly subdues evil, both small and great, is called a contemplative, because he has overcome all evil. Now again, he who wholly subdues evil, both small and great, subdues evil. Now that requires us to be attentive, to pay attention, to observe the behaviors of these people who we regard as contemplatives, who have renounced the world. So do they behave well? Have they renounced evil, small and great? That requires further evaluation, not just by looks alone. Now, what about Brahmana? In Dhammapada verse 393, previously shared, the Buddha emphasizes again, not as a samana, but now as a Brahmana. Brahmana reflects a holy person, a person of pure conduct. So the Buddha emphasizes, not by matted hair. Matted hair is certain groups of people, they tie their hair in a certain way as if to indicate they are very religious. And during the Buddha's time, they were matted hair ascetics. The bottom right picture shows the 1003 matted hair ascetics who were fire worshippers. They finally converted, wanted to become the Buddha's disciples. So not by matted hair, not by lineage, nor by birth does one become a holy man. Now, the Buddha emphasizes lineage. Lineage means because your ancestors were holy people, that means you are holy people. And not by birth. In India, during the Buddha's time, there was the caste system. You had the Brahmin caste, the Kshatriya caste, and so on, the 4 castes. So many of the Brahmanical societies, and of course today, the Hindu society, they officially do not follow the caste system, but practically in their societies, there are still a lot of caste observances. So by birth, caste system is based on birth. So if your father and mother belong to the Brahmin caste, you are born, so you also belong to the Brahmin caste. And the Brahmin caste is supposed to be the religious priestly caste. They assume that you become a holy person. That is the assumption in that caste system. But the Buddha emphasizes, not by method hair, nor by lineage, nor by birth does one become a holy man. But he in whom truth and righteousness exist, he is pure, he is a holy man. So truth and righteousness exist, which means for us to know whether a person is truthful or not, has righteousness, we have to step one side and observe the person's behavior in what the person says over a period of time to be able to come to that conclusion. So not just by looking at the person that we can come to that conclusion. Okay, so with that, I would like to introduce Sister Yok Ting to what they call share Dhammapada verses and for our contemplation with some stories too.
Okay. Thank you, Brother Ananda. Good morning, brother and sister. Today I'm going to share the Dhammapada verses 9 and 10. Okay, here we go, the story of the Devadatta. While reciting in the Jetavana monastery in Savatthi, the Buddha uttered verses 9 and 10 with reference to the Devadatta. Once, the two chief disciples, the Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Mahamoggallana, went from Savatthi to Rajagaha. The people there invited them with their 1,000 followers with a morning meals. On that occasion, there's someone offered 100,000 crores to the organizer of the almsgiving ceremony. He instructed them to dispose of it and use the money should there is any shortage of funds for the ceremony, or to offer it to anyone of the bhikkhus that thought is suitable. It so happened that there was no shortage of anything, and also the two disciples visited Rajagaha only occasionally. Then the cloth was eventually offered to Devadatta, who was the permanent resident of Rajagaha. Devadatta promptly made the cloth into robes and moved about pompously wearing them. Then a certain bhikkhu from Rajagaha came to Savatthi to pay homage to the Buddha and told Buddha about Devadatta and the robe. The Buddha then said that it was not the first time that Devadatta was wearing robes that he did not deserve. The Buddha then related the following story. Devadatta was an elephant hunter in one of his previous lives. At that time in a jungle, there lived a large number of elephants. One day, the hunter noticed that these elephants knelt down to the Pichaga Buddhas on seeing them. Having observed that, the hunter stole an upper part of the yellow robe and covered his body and hand with it. Then, holding a spear in his hand, he waited for the elephants on their usual route. The elephants came, and taking him for a Pachaka Buddha, fell down on their knees to pay obeisance. They easily fell prey to the hunter. Thus, one by one, he killed the last elephant in the row each day for many days. The Bodhisattva, the Buddha to be, was then the leader of the herd. Noticing the dwindling number of his followers, so he decided to investigate. He followed his herd to the end of the line. And he was alert. He was therefore able to evade the spear. He caught hold of the hunter in his trunk and was about to dash him against the ground. When he saw the yellow robe, seeing the yellow robe, he decided and spared the life of the hunter. The hunter was rebuked for trying to kill under the cover of the yellow robe and for committing such an act of depravity. The hunter clearly did not deserve to put on the yellow robe. Then here the Buddha spoke in verse as follows, verse 9. He who is not free from stains of moral defilements, kilesa, and yet dons the yellow robe, who lacks restraint in his senses and speak not the truth is unworthy of the yellow robe. He who has discarded all moral defilements, who is established in moral precept, is endowed with strength and speaks the truth, is indeed worthy of the yellow robe. At the end of the discourse, many bhikkhus were established in Sotapatti fruition. Here is some information of what is Vachaka Buddhas, one who, like the Buddha, is self-enlightened in the Four Noble Truths and hence has uprooted all the moral defilements. However, he cannot teach others. The Vachika Buddhas appear during the absence of the Buddha Sasana teaching. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sister Yoting, for the story. Now, verse 10, just like to emphasize. Here, it mentions, he who has discarded all moral defilements, kilesas. Now, the term kilesas, moral defilements, is not the matter of precepts or anything. Kilesas are talking about certain innate defilements or tendencies within us, which are long-term. It is these kilesas that fuel our ongoing birth and death in samsara. We continually born here, born there, but as long as we are born, we live a life, and we pass away. And it is kilesas that drive us in this ever going round the cycle of samsara. So here, the Buddha mentions, he who has discarded all moral defilements, all kilesas, who is established in moral precepts, is endowed with restraint. Now, restraint means it's one of the aspects, because even though we may not have uprooted all kilesas, we practice restraint. We are practicing the precept. The first step of practicing restraint is in the precepts. And speaks the truth, is indeed worthy of the yellow robe. The yellow robe is a symbol in India in those days, whereby it is of a person who is actively practicing to discard their moral defilements. So it is reflective of this. And right through today, the saffron robe or the yellow robe is very, very important and the symbol of practitioners. Now, becoming a monk or a nun is not for show. It is symbolic of a serious practitioner. Of course, some people who don this for economic reasons and do not practice. Now, they're just there for what we call in Malaysia, free makan. Okay, but that's why in the Dhammapada verses, you can see in the various definitions, all the qualities of whether a person deserves to be a renunciant, to be called a brahmana, or even to be called a monk or a nun, requires our investigation. Not by look, we say, oh, that one's a monk. Yeah, that may be the first screening or first observation. But all the verses I shared earlier requires that we have prolonged evaluation of the worthiness, the virtues of that particular monk or nun before we hold them in the supreme esteem. Now, this is a sharing in the previous series, and sharing regarding from the Sigalovada Sutta. Sigalovada Sutta is a sutta the Buddha gave to a young man who was paying respect early in the morning to the 6 directions. This particular aspect on spiritual guides, that means our relationship with spiritual guides, whether it's a monk or a lay person, but mostly monastics, is mentioned as number 6 in the series. Now here, spiritual guides have certain what we call benefits to us, or shall we say, spiritual guides have certain duties to people like us, lay people. They keep him from doing bad. They support him in doing good. They think of him with kindly thoughts. They teach him what he does not know. They clarify what he's already learned. They explain the path to heaven. Notice in this list of 6, there's no mention of the spiritual guide leading us to Nibbana. But the highest is number 6. They explain the path to heaven. Heaven means born in higher places, so that more to our comfort. But at least the spiritual guide is thinking of our benefit and helping us. Of course, the ultimate of spiritual guide is the Buddha that goes beyond number 6, goes towards getting out of samsara also. Now, moving on. Now, here it is mentioned, they like to see the mendicants. The mendicants, as I mentioned earlier, bhikkhu-nang, that means monks and nuns, and encourage others to do the same. Now, the Pali term for to see or like to see is dasana kammo. Dasana means to see, and bhikkhu-nang is to see the renunciants. Now, here the emphasis is like to see the mendicants. In Dhammapada verse 76, one should find a man who points out faults and who reproves. Let him follow such a wise and sagacious person as one who a guide to hidden treasure. It is always better and never worse to cultivate such an association. Now, coming from the last advice, to cultivate such an association. Now, in other suttas, the Buddha emphasizes, even in the Mangala Sutta as well as the Sigalovada Sutta and many others, the Buddha emphasizes the importance of association. That means who we mix up with, who we hang around, who we call our close friends, who we call friends, in other words. And the Buddha emphasizes, we are allowed to choose our friends. We are allowed, in fact, we should choose our friends, who we want to hang out with. And we should, now, wanting to choose is one thing. We should be allowed to not want to associate with certain groups of people also. So association is very important. Why? You hang out with, some people might use the word crazy people, immoral people. What happens? Just because of our desire to be in the group of people, we have to conform to the unwritten rules or behaviors of that group. So if they are crazy, we have to behave crazily like them to be able to be one of them. That is a problem. Okay, so that association imposes certain additional things, whether said or unsaid or understood between members, that we must behave like the rest. And this causes problems because we can acquire unskillful habits, silly habits, or crazy habits within us, and much to our detriment. So here, the Buddha emphasizes in this Dhammapada verse 76, one should find a man. Now, find a person means we purposely go out and look out for this kind of people. One should find a man who points out faults and who reproves. Why? The person looks at you, see how you behave. Of course, not first time meeting because after some time, a wise person gets to know you. If sees your unruly behavior, your what they call unwise behavior, the person might have some comments about your behavior. Of course, not with the intent of, and of course, sharing that thing with you, highlighting the thing to you, not because the person hates you, but actually is for your benefit. I tell you that you have this weakness in your character, then hopefully you acknowledge it, you step back. Oh, did I behave like that? Then if you agree, then maybe you take steps to try to improve your character. So that person is actually helping you. So one should find a person who points out faults and who reproves. Let him follow such a wise and sagacious person. Sagacious comes from the term a sage. A sage means a wise person. Now, one who would be a guide to hidden treasure, because when a hidden treasure is the improvement in your personal character, your qualities, and so on. So, Dhammapada verse is loaded with a lot of wisdom in there. So we have to go line by line. I have only analyzed cursory, given a cursory explanation as to the meaning of this verse. If you reflect further, I'm sure you can pick up some more wise aspects. Now, the next one, Dhammapada verse 79. He who drinks deep the Dhamma lives happily with a tranquil mind. The wise man ever delights in the Dhamma, made known by the Noble One, in this case, the Buddha. Now, he who drinks deep the Dhamma. The word Dhamma, most people say, oh, Dhamma means the teaching of the Buddha. That's not true. In the Buddhist text, Dhamma just means a teaching. Teaching of who? We do not know. So there were many contemporaries of the Buddha, that means other teachers. And other teachers taught their Dhamma. So this Dhamma, here we may be very careful. Here in the Buddhist context, Dhamma here refers to the Buddha's teachings. But when you read other texts by other religious teachers who may not be a follower of the Buddha, and they all also use the word Dhamma. So it is their Dhamma, their teaching. So the word Dhamma just means teaching. Now, going backwards, the root word of Dhamma is Dara, the Sanskrit term. Dara means to support. So the purpose of Dara or Dhamma by this teacher or that teacher, their intent is to support you, to help you, okay, to make you well. So in this case, since this is in a Buddhist context, Dhamma refers to the teaching of the Buddha, meant to help you. So he who drinks deep the Dhamma, drinks deep means he gets familiar with the Dhamma, gets exposed to it, learns about it, memorizes it, analyzes it, and finds out how this Dhamma, this advice, can benefit themselves so that they can improve for their well-being. So, and here this sentence makes clear. He who drinks deep the Dhamma, deep means not just to know, but he practices it. What happens? The result is lives happily. Okay, because Dhamma supports. So if you put it Dhamma within your life, incorporate it in your life, not just intellectual knowledge, but make it as a way of life, the way you lead your life, the way you interact with your family members, with the community and your workplace, lives happily. And one of the results is with a tranquil mind. Tranquil mind means a mind that is calm, not frantic, not hysterical, not full of worries. Cannot sleep, which are the results of worry, insomnia and all those kind of things. A person who is tranquil sleeps happily, gets a lot of deep sleep, which is good for your brains. Good for our brains also means a lot of deep sleep. Sideline in the medical journals, some mention people who have lack of deep sleep has a higher chance of getting Alzheimer. Those people who have good deep sleep, the brains are able to repair themselves every day. So it has physical and well-being also involved. The health also is involved. So a person who takes the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha into cognizance, knows about it, recognizes it, incorporate it into their life, making it a way of life, the result is they have a happy life. And happy life means they're not worried. They just do their duties in daily life, not in the crazy way, not in the hysterical way, not in the worrisome way, but with a tranquil mind, very calm, very peaceful. So the wise man ever delights in the Dhamma because he knows the result. He has incorporated it, he has practiced it, he sees the result, of course. Ever delights, then he comes back to Dhamma. Oh, yeah, Dhamma has already helped me in this aspect. I shall learn more of the Dhamma to help me in other aspects of my life. Okay. And in Dhammapada 97, the man who is without blind faith, who knows the uncreated, who has severed all links, destroyed all causes, in the bracket, for karma, good or evil, and thrown out all desires. He truly is the most excellent of men. Now, here, the lot of interesting lessons to learn. The man who is without blind faith. The whole of Buddhism, the Buddha emphasizes, please develop saddha, faith. But here in this Dhammapada verse, the Buddha doesn't want you to develop blind faith. Now, the problem with faith is that faith equals belief. And belief does not require evidence, does not require confidence. I just believe you. So in that sense, normally faith equals blind faith because I just believe. So that is the problem with belief. So people ask you, what do you believe? No, I believe in evidence. So but in the Pali term, the Buddha uses the word develop your faith as translation use. Develop your saddha. The Pali word saddha, I do not like to use the word faith because I see it as equivalent to blind faith and belief. Saddha is confidence. Confidence, as in normal English language use, confidence has to be earned. You have to demonstrate to prove to you that what you say is true. What you say, what your advice works. When you test it out, so confidence, whatever you say, has to be tested out, incorporated in your life. You test it out. If it works, you have confidence in what the advice given by that teacher. Then with that confidence, you come back again to what the person teaches other aspects, another part of the Dhamma. Then you try again, oh, it works. So your confidence deepens, becomes more and more, greater and greater confidence. So what happens? You follow what the teacher says because you have tested it, you have investigated it, you have incorporated in your life, and it works. So saddha is confidence. Why? You have tested it, you have investigated it, you have tasted the fruits of that confidence and that trial and error, and because of that, your confidence grows and grows and grows. Your saddha grows. Now, so if you translate saddha as faith, that can create problems. So here the Buddha emphasizes the man who is without blind faith. So the Buddha doesn't want disciples who believe him only to have blind faith. Who knows the uncreated. Now, uncreated here, the Buddha is talking about Nibbana. Nibbana is uncreated, an aspect of peace. But knows uncreated, that means the person who has developed himself or herself until the person sees, experiences, and knows Nibbana directly. Who has severed all links, destroyed all causes. The person who attains Nibbana, what happened? He has stopped making any more wholesome or unwholesome karma. Okay, whatever he's kept alive by his previous karma, whether good or bad, but he stops making new ones. So the Buddha, underneath the Bodhi tree, when he became enlightened, he stopped making karma. But the Buddha continued teaching for 45 years. That means it shows that just because you become enlightened, oh, you will die because you don't make any more karma. That's not true. The Buddha lived on for 45 years to teach and so on, which means there is enough karma to support him, whether good or bad. So before he became the Buddha, he had been an unenlightened individual. He had performed wholesome actions. He had performed not so good actions. So the consequences of wholesome actions give him pleasant experiences. The consequences of performing unskillful actions give him unpleasant results. So the Buddha also has his own bad karma effects, results coming back. That was before he was a Buddha. But once he became a Sammasambuddha or an Arahat or his disciples, anybody who has attained enlightenment, uprooted all his kilesas, all his defilements, he stops making new karma, whether good or bad. So that's why here the statement says, has severed all links, destroyed all causes, the means of making karma, and thrown out all desires. He's no more wanting this, wanting that. No more. He let go. This is the ultimate letting go. So he truly is the most excellent man because he has taken care of himself. Okay, and he has attained the uncreated. Here again, in Dhammapada verse 206, it mentioned, good is it to see the noble ones. Now, here the sentence is called two aspects. One is good and noble ones. Noble ones are talking about people who are enlightened, okay, who have uprooted their kilesas. Good is it to see. Why? When you see them, you not only see them, but you know who they are, you come towards them, you talk to them. And the Dhammapada verse continues. To live with them is ever blissful. So you have the opportunity to live with a noble one. Wow, that's fantastic. One will always be happy by not encountering fools. Fools create problems. So this is another aspect of association. You associate with fools, people who like to do crazy things, they rub off that habit upon you, you become another fool. But you mix up with noble ones, hopefully you learn what other people do not know. You try to copy them, try to understand them, and live by that So that is the gain which you have when you get to see the noble ones. Because not just to see has two meanings. One, to see is from far, or there's a noble one. But how would you know the person's a noble one? You have to hang around them. You have to see their actions, the way they talk. You have to evaluate them, because we do not know that person. First time I'm meeting the person, just because you wear a saffron robe, is that a noble one? I don't know. But he's wearing the uniform of the noble one, or at least a serious practitioner. So we have to go and hang around them, live with them, associate with them, see how they behave, how they talk, whether they speak truthfully and so on, whether they show fearlessness or not. It means you are checking up on them, You're observing, you're evaluating. When you come to the conclusion that they are clearly truthful, they are following the silas, and they in times of danger, they exhibit fearlessness. That is a clear sign they are noble ones. Just because they are truthful may not be fear, they may not be arahats, but the moment they show they are no fear of danger to themselves or other people, fearlessness, that is a clear indication they are clearly enlightened. So good it is to see the noble ones, and we can learn a lot of them. See the noble ones also means to see what they say, how they behave. The seeing here is seeing deeply, not just observation, but learning from them, copying them, understanding why they do things this way and not another way, and so on. So first, of course, first round, good it is to see, or see, just use your eyes and see. But once you hang around them, to see them is to understand them, to inquire after them, to learn from them, and so on. Now, the next Dhammapada verse, 207. Indeed, he who moves in the company of fools grieves for longing. Association with fools is ever painful, like partnership with an enemy. But association with the wise is happy, like meeting one's own kinsman. Meeting one's own means meeting up with your relatives, long lost relatives you haven't seen for a long time. So, and relatives normally do not wish ill for you. They wish you be well and happy, and you also wish them similarly. So association with the wise is happy, because whatever they teach is Dhamma based, and Dhamma is supportive for your life. And in Dhammapada verse 208, therefore follow the noble one, who is steadfast, wise, learned, dutiful, and devout. One should follow only such a person or man who is truly good and discerning, even as the moon follows the path of the stars. So again, here the emphasis is follow the noble ones, who is steadfast, that means ever practicing. If he is not enlightened, ever steadfast, is wise, learned, dutiful, that means do his or her duty, and is devout. Devout means who is ever practicing and hold in reverence other people who are more developed than themselves. So when you follow such a person who is truly good and discerning is the person who is wise, who very investigates deeply, and you gain a lot from that. He who does no evil in deed, word, and thought, who is restrained in these three ways, him do I call a holy man. Again, this is from the Brahmana series. In this case, Dhammapada verse 391. Now, he who does no, now as I mentioned, Brahmanas describe people who are well practiced. They may be or may not be Buddhist monks, followers, but they are practicing something wholesome. So he who does no evil. Now, evil is defined as something that causes hurt to other people and to themselves. Most people assume that, so that person does evil. You assume that the person, A does evil to B. So normally people assume that A does not get the ill effects, that only B, because A do it to B. But actually, although B, from external third party, they might say, B suffers because of something evil A did. But actually, A also suffers. Why? When he does something not so good to B, B suffers immediately. But A has already dug his own, created his own problems. Why? He has ill intention. He wants to hurt B. And by doing that, the person A has generated certain karmic energies that will hurt himself. So when a person has something bad happening to that person, some people say, my bad karma. Yeah, actually it means your bad actions. They're trying to point when the person says, a typical Buddhist, oh, my bad karma, something bad happens to them, they say, my bad karma, as if they are trying to blame somebody else. But they forget the word karma means action. So my bad karma means my previous bad, stupid, idiotic action, which I did it, and now I'm paying the consequences. So my bad karma means I did something wrong lah, because karma means action. It's not somebody else, something far away, some devil go and cause you problem. No, my bad karma means my stupid bad action I did previously. Now I'm reaping the consequences of suffering now, unpleasantness. So he who does no evil, not causing hurt other people, not digging your own grave, so to speak, not hurting yourself. And what is action? By deed, it means bodily action. By word, what you say, and what you think. So only when the person practices this, the Buddha says, him do I call a holy man, a Brahmana. And the next verse, verse number 400, he who is free from anger is devout, virtuous, without craving, self-subdued, and bears his final body. Him do I call a holy man. The last aspect, bears his final body, means the Buddha is describing this person as an arahat. The characteristics of arahat, and the Buddha is also an arahat. An arahat is a person who has uprooted all his kilesas, all his defilements. And by doing that, he stops making new karmic energies. But by also doing that, kilesas include, one of the kilesas include the aspect of ignorance. He has no more ignorance. He only has wisdom. When a person has no more ignorance, when the person's body grows old or by accident he passes away, he dies. The rest of us who still have ignorance within us, when we die, we will be born again. Whether as humans, animals, in the hell worlds, in the devas or brahmas, that is up to what we have done previously. But a person who bears his final body means that for the arahats, they have no more ignorance. Ignorance is a requirement for rebirth to take place. No more ignorance, no more birth. So for a person to bear his final body means this is his last birth. That means when this person dies, he will not be born again, which means this statement describes a person who is an arahat. Like the Buddha is also an arahat. The person who has uprooted 10 his kilesas, his defilements, and one of the defilements is ignorance. And ignorance is a requirement for a person to be born. Okay, a lot of people confuse. Oh, rebirth. Oh, depends on my karma. Yeah, actually, ignorance is number one. Karma, whether good or bad karma, is talking about whether you put fertilizer or you are born in the barren land. So karma is what makes sorry, karma is what makes a person's life pleasant or unpleasant. It's like a fertilizer or watering the plant. That's all. But what qualifies you to be born again is ignorance. As long as you have uprooted ignorance, you're not qualified to be born again, regardless of your karma, whether good or bad. So here, the last sentence, bears his final body, describes a person who is an arahat, an enlightened person. So he who is free from anger, definitely an arahat has no more anger. You do bad things to an arahat to your detriment, but the arahat does not feel anger. That's another quality of enlightened person, arahat. Not just fearlessness, a person who, despite people do bad things to him or her, free from anger. He will not show. Not just show in terms of physical body, the action, not in terms of speech, not only that, but even in his mind, no anger arises. Okay, so an arahat, he who is free from anger, is devout. Devout, why? Because he reveres his teachers, is virtuous, definitely no more craving, because when there's no more ignorance in his mind, he has given up craving, self-subdued, and bears his final body. So this sentence describes a person who's so well practiced that the person is already enlightened. Okay? Now, moving on, they like to hear the true teachings. Now, here the emphasis is on few among men are those who cross to the further shore. Here, the first sentence, underlined sentence, describes the few people who, what is the further shore? The further shore is the person who attains enlightenment, the further shore, another place. So few among men are those who cross to the further shore. The rest, the bulk of men, only run up and down the heater bank. That means you're on this side, like the rest of us, we are all on this heater bank. Few among us are able to cross the further shore. But those who act according to the perfectly taught Dhamma will cross the realm of death. So difficult to cross. So cross, that means if you practice the well-taught Dhamma, practice until you uproot all your kilesas, your defilements, you will reach the further shore. And the first shore is what? Cross the realm of death. You attain the deathless. Now, very often the Buddha, some people will say, and the Buddha will say, this Dhamma that I teach is Amata Dhamma, deathless Dhamma. Then the people say, but the Buddha died, ma. He passed away, ma. He's no more here with us, ma. So what do you mean by deathless? Well, the Buddha's emphasis is that as long as you are born, that includes the body of the Prince Siddhartha, who became ascetic Gautama, who later become the Buddha. As long as you have a body, that body cannot last forever. The body will pass away. But whether you will be born again, that's a different thing. So deathlessness, as described by the Buddha, or another way of describing what Buddhism is about, which is Amata Dhamma, the deathless Dhamma, is talking about not being born again and again and again. So once you attain enlightenment, you're an Arahat, you bear the final body. This is your last death and last birth. And since your psychic has no more ignorance, when you pass away, you will not be born. As long as you're not born again, you can never die. That's what the Buddha means by deathless state. Okay? That is to clarify an important misconception. And then, Dhammapada verse 86. Those whose mind have reached all excellence in the factors of enlightenment, who, having renounced acquisitiveness, rejoice in not clinging to things, rid of cankers, glowing with wisdom, they have attained Nibbana in this very life. Now, those who have reached full excellence in the factors of enlightenment, the Buddha has taught the 7 factors of enlightenment, which I will not elaborate, but I think in many other talks, various speakers have emphasized various aspects of the factors of enlightenment. And the first factor of enlightenment is called development of mindfulness. So that is the meditative aspect. You must develop that. So, and who having renounced acquisitiveness, means renounce that. Acquisitive means, or rejoice in not clinging things, which is another way of saying. Acquisitive means a person who wants to acquire this, I want this, I want this. It means renounce craving, renounce wanting this, wanting that. Rejoice in the not clinging to things, not holding on to whatever you have. Rid of cankers, all the defilements, glowing with wisdom. They've attained Nibbana in this very life. Now, here we talk about individuals who like to hear the true teaching. Now, in these 3 Dhammapada verses given here we talk about the qualities of the true teaching. The true teaching leads you to the further shore, the attainment of Nibbana, the attainment of deathless state. Okay, and what are some of the things you need to practice? Well, that's given in the 7 factors of enlightenment, right? Starting with mindfulness. Okay. Of all the paths, the Noble Eightfold Path is the best. Of all the truths, the 4 Noble Truths are the best. Of all things, passionlessness is the best. Of men, the seeing one, in this case the Buddha, is the best. Here, the first sentence, which is the one I'm talking about, of all the paths, the Noble Eightfold Path is the best. Okay, so the true teaching describes the Noble Eightfold Path, which is incorporated in the 4 Noble Truths. This is the important thing. And in Dhammapada verse, the next Dhammapada verse, this is the only path. There's none other for the purification of insight. Tread this path, and you will bewilder Mara. Now, this is the only path. So if, like the picture on the right, a path is very unique. Any path leads you from where you are to somewhere. It goes somewhere. But the only trouble is, you want to get to that place, wherever that somewhere is, you have to walk along the path. This is a characteristic of path. The path shows you a certain where you are, shows you where you want to go or need to go. But to go there, you have to walk the path. Walk the path is a synonym for practice. So a lot of Buddhists, what they call coffee table practice Buddhists say, we talk about this aspect of the Buddha teaching, talk about this and that. But it means you're looking at the path, beautiful path, beautiful. Look at the plants on the right, look at the land, the steps are very nice. But you don't want to walk. So you are forever stationary. You don't get anything. Or because you're talking, but you're not walking, you're not practicing. You will never reach your destination because you will just admire the path. Oh, beautiful path. That's all. It's called coffee table Buddhism. Be very careful. Buddhism is about action, doing something. And who gains it? You. Now, of course, if you share it with other people gain also. So the path has a lot of meaning. So don't think it's a path or just a path. A path is something that leads you somewhere. And to get to somewhere, you have to walk it. So you have to do something. So it's action-oriented. Now, walking upon this path, you will make an end of suffering. Having discovered how to pull out the thorn of lust, I have made known the path. So the second portion of the sentence is very interesting. Having discovered how to pull out the thorn of lust, I made known the path. Here, also indirectly answers critics' question. Some people say, God came down and whispered to the Buddha. So after that, when the Buddha claimed he is enlightened, he go and teach us. Actually, he's teaching God's plan. But here, the statement, the Buddha himself. And this is not the only place the Buddha mentioned this. Having discovered how to pull out the thorn. I mean, discovered. Who discovers? He. So he had to do all the legwork, all the effort to discover all this. He didn't say, I heard it from somebody. Or I heard it from other teachers. I took this teacher, that teacher. I put it into my rojak bowl. I add my own ideas. I mix it. Now got new variation. And yet another new iteration of philosophy. No, he didn't take the ideas of his common people around him, other teachers. He didn't get whispered into his ear by an angel or capital G-O-D or small G-O-D. He didn't. He discovered the path. So the Buddha discovered the path. This statement, this very short statement, other than other suttas, the Buddha clearly says that he is the discoverer of this path. After he discovered, then I make known the path. So he went out to teach. And what is the benefit of this path? Walking on this path. So again, the path is for walking, for action by us. You will make an end of suffering, your own suffering. The Buddha can only help you to make an end of your suffering by teaching you what is the path, this path, that path, identify the path for you, teach you how to walk along the path. That's all the Buddha can do. You have to do it yourself. I always liken it to the important aspect of when you are hungry, you have to do the work. Why? You have to go and look for food. You have to eat it. Then only you can clear your hunger. Can anybody else makan on your behalf and then you feel full? Cannot. It's very practical. We have a stomach ache. Can anybody else go to Janpan for you? Cannot. You have to do it yourself. It is that personal, and it's a simple way of analyzing. So can someone sacrifice themselves on your behalf? That idea is very ridiculous. It doesn't conform to common sense, everyday life. When you're hungry, when you go to the toilet, when you want to make an end of suffering, that's very personal. You have to do it yourself. The Buddha cannot lift you up and end of your suffering. No, the Buddha can only show you how to do it. If you're hungry, your child is hungry, go, there got biscuit tin there, you can open up and eat something. Something like that. So the parent can teach the child how to clear the child's hunger. So the parent can only show. The parent cannot eat and the child become full. No way. It defies our common sense. It defies our lived experience. So we have experience. Experience is wisdom. Most of us call it common sense. So, and the last Dhammapada verse on this page, you yourselves must strive. As I mentioned, to relieve your own suffering, your own hunger, you have to strive. You have to do something. To Buddhas only point the way. Those meditative ones who tread the path are released from the bonds of Mara. The bonds of Mara means, Mara is here talking about your defilements. The bonds of Mara, bonds means your defilements tie you down to the cycle of birth and death, of samsara. The idler who does not exert himself when he should, who, though young and strong, is full of sloth, full of laziness, with a mind full of vain thoughts, such an indolent man does not find the path to wisdom. So you have to do the action, you have to practice, do something. You cannot be lazy. Of course, you're hungry, you're lazy to go and get the food. Of course, you stay hungry. Another commonsensical thing. Let a man be watchful of speech, well controlled in mind, and not commit evil in bodily action. So here you're talking about speech, thought, and bodily action. Let him purify these three causes of action and win the path made known by the great sage. So the practice, something we have to do, and do with respect to what? With respect to what we say, what we think, and what we do with our bodies. So this is the scope in which we have to practice. Now here, moving away from the Dhammapada verses, let me quote a particular sutta from Iti Vuttaka. Now this sutta is interesting. Now this sutta's name, translated in English, talks about welfare and happiness of the people. This is the name of the sutta. Bahu Janahita Sutta. Now, the Buddha here says, 3 people, monks, arise in the world for the welfare and happiness of the people, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, welfare, and happiness of gods and human beings. What 3? Is when a realized one, means the Buddha lah, when the Buddha arises in the world, perfected, a fully awakened Buddha. So that's the first one. Why? The Buddha goes and teach and share the good news. The second one, furthermore, it is when a monk is a perfected one, with defilements ended. So you're talking about a student of the Buddha who has practiced and he's become perfect. It means and defilements ended, uprooted all his kilesas, all his defilements, who has completed the spiritual journey, done what had to be done. And now notice, I cut some words out, ... utterly ended the fetters of rebirth. Is uprooted the things that trigger him being born again. He stopped his own rebirth. That means the person who has become an arahat, he bears his last body. He will not be reborn when he dies. Ended the fetters of rebirth and is rightly freed through enlightenment. He's free of samsara already. So this is the second one, talking about an enlightened, an arahat. Now, what do arahats do? They teach Dhamma. That's good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end. Meaningful and well phrased. And they reveal a spiritual practice that's entirely full and pure. Interestingly, they reveal a spiritual practice. I like to emphasize the word is practice. Practice means to do something, not to read about it. Oh, very nice. That's all. But practice is take action, be energetic. Okay. Now, in the beginning of the sutta, the Buddha mentioned there are 3 people who benefit us. One is the Buddha himself, who taught. One is an enlightened person, an arahat, who also shares the message with everybody because this person has walked the path, reached his so-called graduation, become an arahat, uprooted his defilements. And the last one, furthermore, it's when a disciple of the teacher is a trainee. It means a person walking the path. Not enlightened yet. A person is a trainee, a learned practitioner with precepts and observances intact. This is a very important aspect. Even this person is not an Arya, not enlightened, only a trainee. But he doesn't simply train by doing this practice, that practice, that practice, but a learned practitioner, learned. To practice, you need to know what to practice. So you need to learn what the Buddha taught. You need to learn the Dhamma as taught by the enlightened ones. So to be a trainee, you need to be learned. Only when you learn, you know what to do, then you practice. So a learned practitioner is someone who knows what to do and he's doing it. Then a learned practitioner with precepts. Precepts are guidelines. For lay people, we observe the 5 precepts. 5 precepts protect us. Precepts are not commandments. The Buddha is not a commander. The Buddha is a teacher. He teaches us. As with any teacher in the classroom, there are students who ignore the teacher. There are students at the back who make noise in the class. That's up to them. They fail the exam. They can say, my karma, my action. I ignore the teacher, so I don't study, so I fail. Of course. Action gives results. You don't learn, you fail the exam. Full stop. Everybody knows that. So a learned practitioner with precepts. Precepts not only protect us. If you are a renunciant, that means if you renounce the world, you are a monk or a nun, but not enlightened yet. You may be a mendicant. What happens? You have precepts. The precepts in the monastic life, the 227 for a monk and 300 over for the nun, guides the renunciant's life, so that ultimately, if you follow the precepts well and practice as advised in the precepts, that person, the trainee, will gain enlightenment. Okay, it guides the person in that direction. And observances intact. Observance means not simply do things based on culture or whatever, based on what the Buddha taught, based on the Dhamma as taught by the Buddha. Okay, so culture and Dhamma are 2 different things. Culture is what the common people like to do. Which sometimes cultural practices can be adhamma. Why? They langgar the Dhamma. The culture say, oh, slaughter the chicken. On this festival day, we go and offer. But Dhamma says, please observe the first precept. Panatipata, don't kill living beings. So culture and Dhamma can be langgar each other. They can go against. Dhamma is supportive. Culture may not be. So beware. Just because there is culture, don't always say culture is right. No. Culture is just tradition brought down by people, whether they are wise people or ignorant people or fools. Kashama, we haven't evaluated. But Dhamma is ever supportive. So be very, very careful. So a trainee who is a learned practitioner who practices the precepts and observances, especially observance of mindfulness and so on, they teach the Dhamma that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, good in the end. Meaningful and well phrased, and they reveal the spiritual practice that's entirely full and pure. So this one is the third person who arises in the world for the welfare and happiness of the people, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, welfare, and happiness of gods and humans. Now, another aspect I'd like to address about this. Some people, some Buddhists, and even non-Buddhists say, oh, only arahats can teach. Those who are not enlightened cannot teach. This sutta begs to differ. A person who is a trainee, okay, learned practitioner, okay, who regards himself as a trainee means the person wants to walk the path, is walking the path, he knows which path needs to be walked on, is because he's learned and he's trying his best. You can learn from these individuals. Okay? Of course, the better teacher is the Buddha. But the Buddha is not with us, but his teachings are recorded, so we can still learn from the Buddha indirectly, not directly from the Buddha. But if you want to see a person face to face, well, a trainee is still useful, as mentioned in this sutta. We can still benefit from a personal trainer. Now, what are the benefits of listening to the teaching. So at the top sentence here, they like to hear the true teachings. To hear is to listen and to learn. The ancient day, when they say hear, means is to learn things. So there are 5 benefits of listening to a teaching. What 5? Here in this Dhammasavana Sutta, it mentions, you learn new things which you have not heard before. Clarify what you have learned. So you get a chance to angkat tangan at the end of the talk, okay, ask questions or have a discussion and so on. Get over uncertainty. Correct your views. You have wrong ideas, you correct, push it back to the right track. Inspire confidence in your mind because you understand this thing, you put in the practice, oh, it works, oh, then your confidence increases as to the Dhamma. So these are the 5 benefits of listening to teachings. Now, this one is also very important. Saddhamma Patirupaka Sutta. In a way, I will call this sutta, Saddhamma means the good Dhamma, but Patirupaka is talking about the decline or continuation of the Dhamma. Then look at the picture. Clearly, some people are doing the wrong things, okay, to their own detriment. And in this case, detriment to the Buddha Sasana, because it destroys the lineage of the last Buddha. Here the sutta says, the true teaching doesn't disappear as long as the counterfeit of the true teaching hasn't appeared in the world. But when the counterfeit of the true teaching appears in the world, then the true teaching disappears. Now, and the Buddha emphasizes, it's not the elements of earth, water, fire, or air that makes the true teaching disappear. Rather, it's the foolish people who appear right here that make the true teaching disappear. That means the idiots are. The bokacau. Examples of foolish people who think they are spreading wise words are those people who create what I call fake Buddha quotes, put nice posters, put words, put the Buddha image, implying that these words are from the Buddha, but actually they're not the words of the Buddha. Or they create some idea, oh, this sounds like wise words. I put the words there, and I put the Buddha at the bottom. Example. So please be ever investigative, not so accept posters from in your social media as the words of the Buddha, just because there's a Buddha image there, or at the bottom right, whatever, blah, 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 at the bottom, the Buddha or Gautama the Buddha. Because please verify. And from my experience, 99% of them are fake. Since my encounter is 99%, I've decided to adopt all incoming posters that point towards the Buddha or imply that the Buddha said this as fake until proven innocent, proven true. To that extent, you know. And all these are created and forwarded by who? Forwarded, not just created, you know. Created satu kali, but forwarded by so many fools. So all those people who share, forwarded as is, forwarded as received. These are called excuses by fools. They're not wise, you know. They're spreading all this. And it is the fools that propagate the spreading of counterfeit Dhamma that destroy the sasana, whether the Buddha sasana can last long or not. They themselves destroy the thing. Here, the Buddha says in this sutta, Saddhamma Patirupaka Sutta, there are 5 detrimental things that lead to the decline and disappearance of the true teaching. It's when monks, even monastics, monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen lack respect and reverence for the teacher, the teaching, the sangha, the training, and meditation. Lack respect. Not just for the teacher, for the Dhamma. So they don't even know what's a Dhamma, and they come up with some silly poster and forward, and they generate a poster. To make it worse, it is the one which is least work, at least the one has to come up with the idea and create a poster. That one does some work, but foolish work lah. But the one who does the least work is the one who share, forward, so forwarded as received. This kind of excuses. These are the biggest fools that are propagating the they lack the respect and reverence for the teaching. Okay? Notice I don't mince my words. I tell them these people are fools. Now, moving forward, there are 5 things that lead to the continuation, persistence, and enduring of the true teaching. It's when the monks, nuns, laymen, and laywomen maintain respect and reverence for the teacher, that means for the Buddha, for the teaching, the Dhamma, the Sangha, the monastic, the training, and meditation. Okay, so clearly, if you maintain reverence, you want to teach somebody, make sure it is what the Buddha taught. Notice, I take the trouble in all my slides. I tell you the source. This is the Dhammapada verse number 1. You don't trust what I share in my slide, you can record down the Dhammapadas 1, 2, 3 or whatever number. You can come to check, either hard copy or via online. And here, I take the trouble to tell you what's the name of this lecture. Sutta means lecture. I tell you the SN 16.13. SN means Samyutta Nikaya, chapter number 16, verse number, sutta number 13. Please verify. Don't trust me. Please check. It's good to read the whole sutta. That you need. I only provide excerpts. And back to the Sigalovada Sutta. Now, this sutta, as I mentioned, taught by the Buddha to a young man who was paying respect to the 6 directions early morning. Here we're talking about friends. Now, encourage others to do the same. How do you encourage? Well, you can recognize a good-hearted friend who's a counselor on 4 grounds, as given in this sutta. They keep you from doing bad. They support you in doing good. They teach you what you do not know. They explain the path to heaven. So notice these 4 things. A lot of overlap with what a wise person, a spiritual guy will share with you, isn't it? Will do, isn't it? A lot of overlap. So even a good-hearted friend is in some ways helping you spiritually also. So a good friend will keep you from doing bad. They encourage you. Please observe the 5 precepts. Explain to you, because 5 precepts protect us. They support you in doing good. Please, then your friend will say, please practice the 5 ennoblers. These 5 practices ennoble you, make you more noble, make you happier. Teach you what you do not know. Explain the path to heaven. Doing this good action, that action, with what intention, and so on. So even a good-hearted friend, not a monastic, your own body is helping you spiritually. So a person who not just benefits themselves by hearing the Dhamma and practicing, but shares it with another person, this person who shares is a good friend. Okay? Now, taking from another sutta, Mangala Sutta, most of us will know. Mangala means blessing, something very very good for us, very good luck for us. Here, underline, timely listening to the teaching. Okay? Why? When you listen, we learn. We can get a chance to investigate and so on. This is given in this particular sutta. The site of ascetics. Here, the translation, Samanancha Dasanang. Dasanang is to see. Samana is ascetics, those who have renounced. The site of ascetics. Here, the Buddha didn't say the site of bhikkhus or bhikkhunan, the site of ascetics. So the Buddha has uplifted the status of people who have renounced, because on the understanding that the samanas of those days want to find the truth. They are ever truthful. They are conscientious. They may not be the Buddha's disciples, but they are conscientious. So the site of ascetics. And finally, when you see them, you learn from these wise people, and timely discussion of the teaching, because discussion helps you clear your doubts, your wrong understanding, and so on. So that summarizes this morning's sharing that you would like to see. The mendicants encourage others to do the same, and the lay follower would like to hear the true teaching and encourage others to do the same.